Hey everybody, welcome back to the Optometry Money Podcast, where we're helping ODs all over the country make better and better decisions around their money, their careers, and their practices. I am your host, Evon Mendrin, certified financial planner and owner of Optometry Wealth Advisors, a financial planning firm specializing in serving optometrists nationwide. And on today's episode, I have another great guest, Josh Patrick. Josh brings just a wealth of knowledge and wisdom in how small businesses work, from both his experience owning and selling a business and his consulting work and wealth management work. And we dive into the importance of knowing the type of optometry practice you want to build. We talk about how to create operational freedom for yourself from the day-to-day work in the practice, what a sale-ready practice looks like. We talk about the power of customer advisory boards and so much more. So whether you're just launching your cold start or have an established practice, hopefully this conversation helps you as you shape your own practice into the future. And you can check out other resources we mentioned in the show notes. Just scroll down on whatever app you're using and it should take you there. If you have any questions on today's episode topics, or if you have topics or questions for future episodes, send over an email to Evon, E-V-O-N, at optometrywealth.com, and head over to our website, optometrywealth.com, and you can learn about how we help ODs proactively navigate and monitor their own finances. You can check out other OD-specific content we've created around financial planning and sign up for our weekly newsletter. And lastly, you can schedule a no-commitment intro call to talk about what's on your mind financially. And without further ado, here is my conversation with Josh Patrick. And welcome back to the Optometry Money Podcast. I'm your host, Evon Mendrin, and once again, I have another fantastic guest. Would love to welcome to the show Josh Patrick of Stage 2 Planning Partners. Josh, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, and I've been excited to talk with you because you bring to this conversation so much experience in small business. Not only in your own experience having owned and I believe eventually selling a business, but also in your work with consulting with businesses and also in your work as a wealth advisor too with your own wealth advisory firm. So you've seen the challenges of business owners from a lot of different industries probably and a lot of different perspectives. And so I'm excited to dive into that with you, even though both you and I are not directly in optometry, and you're not an optometrist, you don't own an optometry practice. It's so helpful to be able to learn from the opportunities and challenges of other businesses and the way other businesses have done things. And in a lot of ways, challenges and opportunities are similar across businesses. The details are different, but a lot of the same challenges and a lot of the same opportunities are the same across different types of businesses. So I'm excited to dive into your experience and see what we can learn. But before we do that, give us a little bit of a background. I mean, what has been your experience with business ownership and what eventually led to the business that you own now?
Well, when I was 24, I was in business. I was working for my father. He sent me 2 hours away to close down an operation. Instead of being the brat that I was, I picked up 5 new accounts. So he said, I don't want to go up there anymore. You buy it from me. So I bought a business at 24. I had a part-time employee in me. And then in the next year, we ended up buying out our competitor because they were in bankruptcy. And I went from a half-time employee to 25 employees when I was 25 and had no idea what I was doing. So I made all sorts of mistakes. We were very, very successful for the first couple of years, which is the absolute worst thing that can happen to somebody who's 25 in business, because I thought it was my skill and not just plain luck. And I learned it was just plain luck because the next 3 years, I almost went bankrupt each one of those 3 years with a different thing. And along the way, I have a degree in American history, which does not prepare you really well for being in business, but it does teach you how to think. So that was good. And I started reading a whole bunch of books. I've been reading a book a week since I was 18 years old and continued doing that. But now I switched all my reading to business, took a bunch of business courses, ended up being the education chairman for the National Vending Association for 8 years and president of the New York State Vending Association as the youngest guy that ever did that. And we built a business that went from a half-time employee to 90 employees. And 20 years later, the industry has sort of deserted me. So I sold that company. And I looked around and said, what's next? And it appeared to me I like consultative sales, and high-end life insurance is very consultative the way it's sold. So I joined a big mutual life insurance company for a couple of years. My business, my clients all own businesses. That was what was called a natural market, the people I could work the best with. And I realized that, people who own privately held businesses need more than life insurance. So I left that place and opened up my own wealth management firm. And we've been going on with that for the last 20 some odd years. About 15 years ago, I opened up our consulting organization, The Sustainable Business. And now we focus on working in people in the construction business. We have a methodology that helps them double their profits in 1 year.
Wow. So you, early on, you saw some success mixed with your overconfidence. It turns out was
arrogance.
Arrogance was a dangerous mix. But it is interesting to note that you saw those mistakes and you learned from them, and then you learned how to become a business owner.
Yes.
And what did that take? Was it just business courses? Was it through trial and error? I mean, how does
it was all the above.
Okay.
Reading, taking courses, trial and error, hiring consultants, hiring a coach, going through New Age seminars, which was big back in the early 80s. A whole variety of things that I did along the way. I've always been really curious. And I find the best business owners have a huge amount of curiosity about the world, and they always want to learn things so they can do it better. So if you're curious, that's a big leg up in creating what I would call a business and not a lifestyle business or a solopreneur practice.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I think that's good to know, because I would imagine a lot of optometrists go through optometry school. They are trained to be optometrists. They're trained to help their patients with eye care. And then through that career, they may, a few years in, they may decide, okay, I'm going to cold start a practice. I may buy into a practice, and suddenly they find themselves as business owners, maybe not really realizing exactly what that looks like or what that entails. So I think it's good to know that it is possible to learn how to become that. But it took you, at least, to become like a student, basically, to always be curious, to try to find any resource you can to get better and better at figuring out what it means to own a business.
Anybody I know who has built a business from scratch to over 50 employees, 100% of them are curious.
Yeah.
Because, essentially, when you start a business from scratch, there's a pretty good chance you never had any business school training. In fact, I believe business school training is actually not beneficial for people who own privately held businesses, because that's not what they teach. But at the same level, people that build businesses, I mean, you can build a business with 10 or 15 people and not know anything about a business, not ever really knowing anything about a business, because you don't have to really run that as a business. It's a practice. That's especially true in the world of professional services, and optometry falls in that world. I mean, I would bet the vast majority of optometry practices in this country have less than 10 employees.
Yeah, can you talk more about that then? What is that delineation? Where's that line between becoming a practice, or going from a practice to becoming a business? What does that actually mean?
Now, the key skill you need to learn if you want to have what I call a real business is you have to learn how to delegate. And learning how to delegate is the absolute hardest skill a business owner is ever going to learn. And it's also a thing that keeps businesses from growing. If you can't effectively delegate, you can't grow your business. If you get over 25 employees and you have not learned how to delegate well, you're going to break yourself and you're going to break your business.
So why does that keep businesses from growing?
Well, you have to have people. I mean, when you grow your business, you grow people. And when you grow people, those people have to do things effectively and efficiently.
Mm.
And if you haven't figured out a way to work through others, you're going to have people off doing stuff they want to do, and it might not be valuable for what you're trying to do. So if you don't have articulated values with clarifying statements, people won't know what you're about. If you can't work through others where you say, okay, I want you to do this, and they go off and do it, and then you inspect the work afterwards and make sure it's done properly. If you don't have documented systems, all these things keep you from running a business without your involvement.
Mm.
You know, the holy grail of a business is what I call operational irrelevance. And that doesn't mean you're not involved in your business. It means you're not involved in the day-to-day operations of your business. And when you can make yourself not involved in the day-to-day operations of your business, you have something of value that others would want to own. If the business is based on you, no one's ever going to want to own it. They may buy it, but you're not going to get a lot of money for it. And if they buy it, you're going to hold a lot of paper. In the wealth management world, is as much as 65%, which means that you're taking a huge risk with this asset you've built up, because once you've sold it, you have no control about what the buyer is going to do. Hmm. And I will tell you that about 90% of the time when I see someone sell a business, the seller completely hates, I mean hates, what the buyer does with the business, because they run in a very different way.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Becoming operationally, what was the term? What did you call it?
I use two terms: operational freedom or operationally irrelevant.
Operationally irrelevant. Now that can strike a lot of owners the wrong way. I mean,
that's why we use operational freedom now instead of that
does
term.
Sound a little bit better, but you think about that concept. Okay, you cold started practice. You, for the early years, are doing a lot of the work. I mean, you are seeing patients, you're doing a lot of the administrative work until you start to build the team. You know, you get other team members who start to take some of that load off your shoulders so that you can do the things that are most valuable to the practice. And at some point, you have to be able to have other people doing those things. I mean, you cannot.
You can't supervise more than 15 people yourself.
Yeah.
And I would submit you can't supervise 15 people well.
Yeah. So how does a practice owner become operationally irrelevant in their practice? So that's, I mean,
they'd have to build, they would likely build a multi-unit business, and they would have optometrists working for them, and they would have an operational manager who runs the eyeglass portion of the business, and they would figure out, how to have a manager in a store, and those managers will report to you as the business owner, the optometrist, and you would mostly get yourself out of doing optometry yourself, but you'd have a team of people who does that. It might be 2, it might be 4, it might be 25 stores.
Hmm. And what's the test, I guess, to figure out, like, is my practice, am I operationally irrelevant to my practice? Is it basically, can I leave for a week and it runs without me? Like what test would you...
Can I leave for a month, will it run without me?
Yeah. I've heard stories of, consultants tell stories. Well, they'll tell practice owners, they're speaking to practice owners, and they'll say, like, you should take at minimum 2 weeks of vacation a year. And there's crickets, because every practice owner there is thinking, well, that's not possible. Like there's no way I can do that. So I think what you're saying is a big part of how a practice owner can do that, is how to free themselves from the day-to-day work of the practice so that they have more time freedom. The practice is its own entity, can run without them. What are the benefits to the practice owner in building a team, training those employees to do things, building documented systems and processes? Like what's the benefit to the owner of taking that work off of their shoulders and becoming operationally relevant?
I mean, besides the extra profit they earn?
So there's extra profit. Yep.
The,
What
the,
else?
the real benefit is, I mean, you'll make a lot more money if you learn how to do it well.
Yeah.
Um, but the real benefit is freedom.
Yeah.
You're not tied into showing up at 8 o'clock, seeing patients till 4 o'clock. You could show up when you want to, and you're not going to get burned out likely because you're not going to be doing the same thing for 20 or 30 years. Running a business from the point of operational relevance is a lot more fun than running a business when you're operationally involved. And the reason is that when you have 3 employees, you have to learn to do things you're not very good at. And when you do things you're not very good at for a long period of time, it drains a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And when you have your energy being drained for a really, really long period of time, you get to what's called burnout. And when you hit burnout or overwhelm, you're going to want to get the heck out of your business as fast as you possibly can, or you're going to continue working it and hating every second of it.
Mm.
So if you love being an optometrist and that's all you want to do, then be an optometrist. You don't have to create a business that can be sold. There are lots of ways to get to financial freedom without having to build a big business. I mean, it's, one of the things I tell people in the wealth management world, I say, if you're going to work with business owners, you need to become an expert at qualified retirement plans, 401ks, profit sharing plans, cash balance plans. And it happens to be the world of optometry is perfect for that stuff because you can pre-fund your retirement or pre-fund your buyout by making large donations every year to qualified plans. And the amount of money you can put in there is more than you're ever going to want to put in there. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah.
I've never had anybody say, I want to put the maximum amount I can into my plan. Yeah. Never has not happened. I've gotten close a couple of times, but never at the biggest number.
Yeah.
So you can build over a course of your career, just as a practicing optometrist, $3.5 million in your retirement plan, which is way more than you would ever get when you, if you were to sell your practice.
Yeah, can you talk more about that? Because I think there can be an idea that I'm just going to constantly reinvest back into the practice. Why shouldn't those ODs expect to cover their retirement security with the sale value of the practice? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, let me give you an example. What's the average OD make for annual salary?
About 150, depending on what modality they're practicing in, whether it's private practice, corporate.
Okay, so for them to replicate $150,000 in cash flow, they would need about $3.5 million sitting aside. To end up with a business that's worth $3.5 million that they can invest, they're going to have to sell it for close to $6 million. So how many single optometrist practices sell for $6 million?
Not many.
I can give you the answer to that, by the way. It's none. I mean, the truth, and this is true across almost all businesses. And I say this all the time. I talk about these numbers all the time. There's approximately 28 million businesses in the United States. Only 6 million have any employees at all. The rest have no employees. And of those 6 million businesses, only 300,000 do more than $5 million in sales, and only 150,000 do more than $10 million in sales. And if you don't sell your business for at least $6 million, $5 million, you're not going to just sell your business and ride off into the sunset. You better have done other things along the way. I developed this tool years ago called the 4 Boxes of Financial Independence. And the reason I developed it was really pretty simple, was that, I had people from the wealth management world talk to me in my own vending company. They used to come into me and say, you need to diversify your investments because all your eggs are in one basket. I never bought that argument.
Yeah.
And neither do other business owners. But where they do buy that argument is when I show them the 4 boxes and I say, here's your business, we're going to create cash flow. Here's your retirement plan, how much cash flow that will create. Here's your investment real estate, what's that create for cash flow? And here's other investments. And when I add them all up together, they're woefully underfunded. And when they're woefully underfunded, now I've got their attention. And that's where a qualified plan becomes a really, really valuable tool. Business owners live, as a rule, way underneath their means, meaning that they could spend more money on lifestyle if they wanted to, but they generally don't. So now they know that if they want to ever retire, and this conversation generally never happens till you're 50, because you don't think about retirement when you're first starting your business. You're thinking about building your business, and you have no capacity for that. So at 50, you're likely significantly underfunded for retirement. And that's where cash balance plans come in. If I have a 5-person optometry practice and I can figure out how to get my cash flow up to $250, I can take $100,000 a year and put in my retirement plan. Well, I'm 50 years old and I work till I'm 70 because I like what I'm doing. That's $2 million in contributions plus growth. So let's say over a 20-year period, that money would grow to $3.5, $4 million. There's no way in the world the practice would ever sell for much more than $600,000.
Yeah, I think that's that cash balance plan is such a powerful tool, for practice owners who feel like they are dedicating so much time and resources to the business. Their practice ownership, business ownership does afford you ways to catch up, so to speak, in ways to put in quite a lot of money into these qualified retirement accounts, which can not only be a wealth building tool, but also a significant tax planning tool for every business owner. It's a huge lever to be able to pull later on, especially later on in your career. But I want to ask about, I guess let's go back to that point of what you're talking about, of filling up these different buckets of financial freedom. And that, I think that goes back to just sort of thinking about how does a practice provide a return to the business owner? Optometry practices can be, if successful, significant cash flowing businesses, consistent cash flow businesses over the career of that owner. Yes, there may be a resale value, meaning it's also an asset on the balance sheet of the owner. There very well may be resale value at the end of that owner's career, but that cash flow is what's significant and consistent over that career. And how you use that cash flow, exactly what you mentioned, Josh, how you're using that cash flow to, yes, reinvest into the practice, but then also build your wealth alongside of that business. And I like the way you frame that. You're pre-funding your buyout. You're using the value that practice is generating, that business is generating, and pre-funding that future buyout event. That's an interesting way to frame that, because I agree with that diversification benefit. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That business is going to be the biggest returner. It's going to be the biggest return driver of all these different assets you're looking at. But that's a great way to pre-fund that buyout down the road.
Actually, the business will be the smallest as a rule.
Really? In terms of rate of return?
Think about this. I just showed you a way to get $3.5, $4 million in your qualified plan.
Yeah.
Well, that's way bigger than the value of the business. I'll give you another one.
Okay.
Let's buy the real estate that you run your practice in.
Yep.
So you sell your practice, you don't have to sell the real estate, you can rent it.
Right.
And the cash flow from the rental will be way bigger than the cash flow you're going to get from selling the business, paying taxes and fees, and reinvesting it.
Yeah.
Because that $600,000 business is not $600,000 in your pocket. It's more like $400,000 in your pocket. And if I use the 4% rule, which means I can spend 4% of my value, that's $16,000 a year. $3.5 million is $4 million is $240,000 a year. Last time I checked, 240 is bigger than 16. Now, if I add on my real estate, let's say my real estate's worth $600,000 to $1 million. I'll do $1 million because the math is easy. And I get an 8% cap rate. That means 8% of the value of the building is what I get for rent. Now, I'll either pay rent to myself and pay off the note over 15 or 20 years, or I'll pay rent to a landlord and get no value for it. When I'm paying rent to myself and I sell my practice, I'm going to get $16,000 a year for my practice I can spend, but I'm going to get $80,000 a year for my real estate because I paid off the real estate and it's a triple net lease, which means the person leasing the property pays the taxes and the maintenance, all that, insurance and that kind of stuff. And then $80,000 goes into my pocket.
Yeah. Yeah. That's using the cash flow from the business to build these other buckets of wealth. And this is something I track too, I think is important too in looking at, okay, what amount of your net worth, what amount of the wealth that you're building is in liquid stuff, cash, after-tax investments, how much of it is in retirement accounts, how much of it is in real estate equity, and how much of it is in business equity. And I think that balance is important because what you don't want to do is get to that point where you're about ready to say, hey, I want to step away from the business. I want to be financially free. I want to retire and have no optionality and have to rely on a sale value in order to get you there. If done right, you've used the value and the cash flow of that business over time to build wealth in all these different areas so that you have more optionality. You're pre-funding your buyout, as you mentioned. And I think you're a lot more prepared for retirement at that point. One thing I wanted to ask about is something you've talked about before is building a sale-ready practice. And maybe this ties into the owner being operationally free from the day-to-day of the practice. But what does it mean then to build a business that's sale-ready? What does that mean?
Well, sale-ready means somebody else wants to own it. It's pretty simple.
Pretty simple. Okay.
Yeah, if your company is sale-ready, you have created a business that other people want to own.
So I think that can be sort of a distant concept, though, to a lot of ODs, either in the middle of their career, earlier in their career. This idea of even thinking about selling the business is so far and distant. At what point should someone start to think about, is their practice sale ready? I mean, when does that thought come in?
Well, it comes back to what's your goal as an optometrist. Is it to build a business or to build a practice? And if it's to build a business, you need to be multi-unit. You have to have optometrists working for you. You have to be operationally free, and you want to fill what I call the 4 buckets of profit. If you're filling the 4 buckets of profit, you're going to have created a business that has enough cash flow that will get people interested in your business. The truth is, when someone buys your business, they may tell you how great you are and how important you are and how all that stuff flies into what you need. But the truth is, they don't care about you. They want your business. They want your systems. They want your managers. They want your cash flow. They don't want you. So if you haven't done that stuff, where you've got managers in place, and you've got systems in place, and you've got cash flow in place, you really don't have a sale-ready company. So the 4 buckets of profit is, number one, is what's your lifestyle? Are you getting enough money out of your business to create a lifestyle you want? Number 2, do you have an emergency fund? Because all businesses face hiccups, and I like to see 6 months of operating cash in an emergency fund. It almost never happens, but I like to see it. You need to have a fully funded growth program, which means that, okay, if I'm going to open new stores or I'm going to hire a new optometrist and I'm going to get a new store open, that's going to cost me a whole bunch of money because no store is going to be profitable from day one. It might get profitable pretty quickly, but it's not going to be day one. And then finally, do you have a fully funded retirement plan? Because even if I have a multi-unit store, let's say build up to 3 to 5 stores, which would be a really pretty successful business and sort of complicated, you're still not going to get more than a couple $1 million for that business. You know, if each one of the units makes $500,000 and you got 4 units, that's, $2 million. Well, that's a great business. Now you're probably going to get $7, $8 million for that if you sell it. But after taxes, it's $5 million. If you have a business that's making $2 million a year, I can promise you're not going to live on $150,000 a year. You're going to live on $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year.
Yeah, so that's interesting. You think of these like buckets to fill up. As there's extra cash flow after operations, you're filling up each of these different buckets, one to the next. And it covers, each one sort of covers an important part of that business owner's financial life. And in the business, you're managing risks with the emergency fund. You are planning for the future, the growth of the business with a fully funded growth plan. You are managing your own financial security by funding your own investments outside of the business. I mean, by each of these buckets, you're sort of tackling a key issue, a key component of that business owner's life.
A book that can really help people a lot with this, a friend of mine named Mike McCullough has written a book called Profit First.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend that. It's a really good tool for private business owners. It's sort of like, the envelope system that you may have heard about in the Depression, where someone put $2 in a food envelope, $2 in a rent envelope, and $1 in the utilities envelope every week when they got done, and they had their economic life segregated. Well, that's what Profit First is. You build accounts for yourself where you start with profit, and then operations and taxes, and you have different buckets that you're filling for all the stuff. So when you need the cash will be readily available for you.
Yeah.
And Mike's systems it's so simple. It's really good. And I highly recommend people use it.
Yeah. That's becoming a bigger and bigger book, I guess, a more popular and popular system in optometry right now. So I'll put that book in the show notes. What is the importance of knowing the difference between profit and cash flow in the business? What are the difference between the two, and why is it important to know that?
Well, profit is a tax calculation.
Yeah.
Cash flow is what you get to spend. Now, there are certain things like, for example, if I increase my inventory, in other words, I go out and I open a new store and I buy $40,000 worth of glasses, that's not an expense. So it doesn't show up in my profit and loss statement. Mm-hmm. But if I look at my cash flow statement, it will show up as a use of cash because I went out and spent $40,000 on cash. If I go and I buy a building, that doesn't show up as an expense on my balance sheet, except for the rent that I pay to myself. Mm-hmm. On my profit and loss statement. But if I look at my cash flow statement or my personal cash flow statement, you'll see that there's a huge amount of cash. If I borrow money to open a new practice or open a new store, the interest is deductible. That's an expense. The principal is not deductible. It doesn't show up as an expense on my profit and loss statement, but it certainly is a use of cash, and it's a use of cash off my cash flow statement. Yeah. So if there are lots of businesses that are profitable, in fact, I was one. We were a profitable business, and we came a hair's breadth close to going out of business because we ran out of cash, simply because I did not understand the difference between a profit and loss statement and a cash flow statement. Yeah. Yeah. And once I learned it, and here's my, sort of wise guy comment. Private businesses run on cash flow. Public companies run on profit. They don't care about cash flow because they swim in cash. They care about managing profits because that's what drives their stock price. Well, I can tell you there isn't one private business owner I've ever met who really cares about what their stock price is. What they care about is, how can I kill my profits at the end of the year so I don't pay taxes? And that's when they go out and buy stupid crap they don't need.
Yep. Sometimes at their CPA's request, and they don't know any better. Yeah, that's such a good point in that, the profit and loss statement, everyone loves to look at the P&L.
Well, it's easy to read. A cash flow statement is really confusing.
Yes.
If you look at the cash flow statement, the way it's set up by accountants, and I don't know why they do this, but they do it. You see a bracket, which looks like a use of cash. It's actually a source of cash.
Yeah.
And you look at a number that's not bracketed, you would think would be added to cash.
Yeah.
Actually, it's deducted from cash.
Yes.
And the way it's set up is just, I will tell you, it takes me 4 or 5 one-hour sessions with a business owner to get them to understand their cash flow statement if they're fast at learning.
Yeah. And to the defense of optometrists and other business owners out there, you went to school to learn optometry. You did not go to school to learn financial statement analysis. From what I understand, practice management is barely taught in optometry school. So you're sort of learning from behind here. So, but thinking about, again, the P&L, there's a lot of tax games and accounting games that can be played with the P&L just to get a more favorable tax result. But that doesn't tell you about what's actually happening with the cash inside and outside of the business. And one thing we talk about is okay taxes. Like you can get to a very profitable end of a very profitable year and not have cash to pay taxes, right? And that's what's, I think, really important about having some sort of cash management system, some sort of system, whether it's Mike Michalowicz's Profit First, whether it's some others that are out there, having some sort of system to tell you, okay, how much cash is in the practice, where does it need to go next, and making sure that you're putting cash into different accounts for things like taxes, for the emergency fund, like Josh mentioned. Like making sure you're proactively separating the cash out of your reach, out of your operating money, essentially, so that you know it's there. Because if you're only relying on the profit or loss, assuming that it's even accurate with accurate numbers, that it's been looked at throughout the year, if you're only looking at the profit and loss, you can be in for a huge surprise at the end of the year, and you're trying to get money to pay for expenses and to cover taxes. Or are there any other good cash flow management systems out there that are pretty simple outside of Profit First? Have you seen anything that works really well?
Well, I'm a big fan of dashboards.
Okay.
And a dashboard is typically it's a spreadsheet that we do over 13 weeks. And you put the numbers in there that are drivers for your business. I work in the construction world a lot, and we have a pretty standard dashboard we use for contractors, which is, what's our backlog? Is it going up? Is it going down? What's our efficiency per crew that we've got out in the field? And is that, at least 2 times what we pay them as salary, but we really want 3.5 to 4? What's the amount of cash we have on hand? So I can see, is that growing? Is that not growing? Because at the end of the day, it's all about how much cash you have. What do you have in accounts receivable? What do you have in inventory payable? And what are the changes that are going in that? And that's pretty much, and then we get into sales numbers, which is how many sales calls are your salespeople making a week? How many proposals are they making a week? What's the dollar value of those proposals? What's the number of proposals that get closed? And what's the dollar value of those proposals being closed? And is that dollar value matching up at least with how much we can produce in a week? So if I can produce $50,000 worth of work in a week, and my sales team is not producing $50,000 in new sales a week, I'm going to have a problem. At the same level, if I'm doing $50,000 a week in production, and my sales team is now doing $80,000 or $90,000, and by the way, that happened to a client of mine recently, and it caused all sorts of problems, because now that backlog is going to explode, and you've got unhappy customers because it's taking too long to install. Now, if I sat down and thought about the optometry world for a little while, I probably could come up with the same thing.
Yeah.
It would be, what are my sales of, hard goods, glasses and lenses and things like that? And how many customers come in? What is the percent, especially in the optometry world? I want to know how many exams am I doing, and what percent of those exams turn into eyeglass sales?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a really key number, because we were talking about this before, is that one of the challenges in the optometry world is the margin on glasses and lenses is unbelievably stupid. I can go to Costco and take my script and buy my glasses for 50% and then go online for 25%. Well, what's the value you're providing to a customer to spend that extra money with you to buy the glasses in your store? And that becomes a challenge that you need to be thinking about. So I would put that into a dashboard so I could see, are my numbers successful? So for example, I don't know what the numbers should be, but let's say I do 10 exams a day. And 3 of those people buy glasses from me and 7 don't. Well, that might be a problem. I don't know if it is or not because I don't know the numbers of the industry.
Yeah.
But it's something I would certainly want to be tracking.
Yeah. So you're looking at things like capture rate, which is what you're talking about. You're looking at one of the conversations I had recently, and I'll put this in the show notes, is with Dr. Chad Fleming, and he talked about some of these, 4 of these health metrics to see what the direction is in the short term of the practice, and he's looking at things like health of the schedule, how many slots are available, how many slots are staying on. So it's schedule health. Things like revenue per optometry hour, per optometrist hour, revenue per staff hour. So there are definitely metrics out there. And one of the interesting things I just heard from your description of this dashboard is that it's forward-looking stuff. Like it's not pulling up the financial statements and looking at, okay, what happened this year versus last year versus the year before. It's all forward-looking stuff that tells you, okay, where are things heading? And a lot of it's operational stuff. It's not all financial stuff. A lot of it is the more operational stuff that happens in the day-to-day.
Rarely do you see many numbers in a dashboard which come off your profit and loss statement. And you do a P&L once a month. You do your dashboard entries once a week.
Yeah.
And you do 13 weeks. You do a rolling 13 weeks. When you get to work week 13, the oldest week falls off and the newest week goes. You do an average of what happens to those 13 weeks. You can look at what happened last week compared to my average, and you can look across your line and very easily see what is the trend. Am I staying even with how many people sell? Am I being at whatever percent? Let's say I want 90% of my slots filled and 85% of the appointments held. Well, I'm just making up those numbers. I don't know if they're right or they're wrong, but I would say this is what I need to have a healthy practice. And if I'm not there, maybe I need to be doing something, which means you need to learn about marketing and you need to learn about sales. And there are 2 different things. Marketing creates awareness. Sales creates customers. And you have to realize that marketing does not create customers. So stop expecting it's going to. It just creates conversations if you're lucky.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you think about why those numbers don't come from the P&L. In the P&L, your financial statement, like a P&L, it tells you the result, right? It tells you the result, and those other metrics that we're talking about tell you the why behind those numbers, like what's actually happening and where are you headed. Because ultimately you have to look at something like a P&L and then ask yourself, like, why is revenue increasing? Why is profits increasing? Why is cost of goods sold as margin going up or down? Like you have to ask yourself why. And until you dig into something like a dashboard, like Josh is talking about, you really don't know the answers to that. You're sort of left wondering, how do you make decisions week to week in the business unless you're taking a look at that and seeing what's going on day to day behind the scenes.
Yeah. One of my favorite management thinkers is a fellow named W. Edwards Deming. And he's the father of the quality control process improvement. Everything Six Sigma, Lean, Theory of Constraints, Scrum, all come out of Deming's work. And one of the things Deming would say is make work visible. Well, a dashboard makes your work visible. It makes it visible, at least for you. And I highly recommend you make it visible for everybody in your company. I have a lot of stupid sayings, but one of my stupid sayings is that which gets measured gets done. So if I'm measuring something and I just put it up on the wall, I will promise you that number will get better.
Mm.
So, for example, in an optometry practice, you need to train the people who answer the phone on how to sell, because that's the point of contact. As far as marketing goes for awareness, what's the most important thing an optometry practice can do? What's the one thing, if they're only going to do one thing, what should they focus on? It won't be their website. It won't be their videos. It's going to be Google reviews.
Mm.
So you need to find every customer that comes in and have an easy process for them to leave a review. That's follow-up. That's where you have your team in your office. After someone comes there, you send them a nice little email that says, gee, thanks a lot for coming. Don't ask for put a questionnaire for what kind of service do we provide. Ask them for a review.
Mm.
I am more likely to give a review. I am so sick of people saying, here's my survey, please fill it out. I don't give a crap about your survey. I really don't. I'm sick of filling out surveys. If you do have a survey, keep it to 3 questions at the most.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how many of this has happened to you, but people send me these surveys, especially in the financial services world. And I realized it would take me a half an hour to fill the thing out. I'm never going to finish it.
Yeah.
Same thing with phone calls. I get these phone calls about, I need to know your attitudes. I say, my first question is, how long will this take? And the answer usually is 20 minutes. Why am I going to give you 20 minutes of my time with nothing in return? What do I get out of it?
Yeah.
Now, if I leave you a review and I happen to be a connector, now there's, connectors are people who love to introduce others to others that think they can use something. So what your job is as the optometrist, is to figure out who the connectors are in your practice. Who are the people who introduce to you new patients? And what are you doing to nurture those connectors so they'll make more introductions?
Hmm.
Now, one way is going to do it is you can put together what I call a customer advisory board, where you bring 6 or 7 or 8 of your patients together 4 or 5 times a year, or 3 or 4 times a year, and you talk about your practice and you listen to what they would like to see you do to make it better. They're going to make your business better. But because they're also connectors, the more they know about your business, the easier it is for them to introduce people to your practice who will also become great customers. Hmm. Now, if you do that, you need to have a curmudgeon in your customer advisory board. You can be a curmudgeonly connector like me. I'm a connector, but I'm also a curmudgeon, because I'll tell you exactly what I think. And until somebody does that, everyone's going to play nice.
Got it. You need someone that's brutally honest.
You need somebody brutally honest.
Got it. So that I love that concept. I have to admit, I don't know that I've heard of any practice owner doing that within their practice, bringing in patients in this advisory council, getting their feedback, getting them involved in the direction of the practice. I don't know anyone that's done that. And for the listener, if you do, I would love to interview them on this podcast, because I really love that idea. Do you see that that's really common in other industries, other fields?
It's not common in any industry, but I push it like crazy.
Okay.
I've been using customer advisory boards in my own businesses for 40 years.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something I've heard in financial advisory firms doing that too. But that's basically the extent of that. I've not heard that used really anywhere else. So
yeah, it's rare. It's rare. It's really powerful. It's probably the most powerful marketing tool you can use after Google reviews for a professional services group.
What would be the hesitation to do something like that? I mean, is it that you don't want patients knowing on what's going on behind the scenes? Like what might be a reason that someone would say, I don't feel comfortable doing that?
It takes time.
I mean, there's
people
is there privacy concerns? I mean, what?
No, there's no privacy concern with that. The challenge comes in is that it takes time, and you want to be careful with how you're spending that time. But I hear dumb reasons that I can't share information. My customers don't really care. They wouldn't want to participate. It's all garbage. I can tell you that when you ask somebody to be on your customer advisory board, they see that as an honor. Now, you don't bring them into your office and do it there. You go out and you get a restaurant, get a private room, and have a nice meal. It'll cost, $5, $6, $7, $800. But the amount of information you get for that $5, $6, $7, $800 is unbelievable. With this caveat, when you run it, people may try this, and a lot of times you'll see people. There's a person in the financial services world that says they don't work. It's because she doesn't know how to do them.
Got it.
But the thing is, the reason I started doing an advisory board versus focus groups, a focus group is where you're bringing, again, a group of customers, you're a professional marketing person who asks the questions, and you're behind a one-way mirror watching this. And the marketing people say, well, you can't do it yourself because you're going to shade the answers. Well, yes, you could do that if you do it wrong. And if you sit there and start arguing about what people tell you, instead of listening and say thank you, you're going to it's not going to be valuable. If there's things that you need to be doing. If you say, if you let people say, I think people would like X, and you don't ask them, would you spend your money on X, and get an answer from them, you might go down the wrong road. I'll give you my example. On one of my advisory boards in my vending company, people say, you need health food in your machines. Everybody wants health food. Well, like an idiot, I went out and bought a bunch of health food, put it in our machines, and guess what happened? We threw it all away. And the mistake I made, and I corrected that mistake based on that little learning experience, was, will you spend your money on it? And when I asked people that about health food, when it came up again, guess what they said? No, it's not something I want, but other people do.
I got it.
And guess what? If someone says they won't spend their money on it, ignore what they say. Don't tell them they're wrong. Just ignore it.
Yeah.
If they say, yeah, of course I spend money on that, then you're talking about a process that's there. For example, one of the things I would try to do if I was an optometrist is I would try to figure out how I could set up a membership program that you get a package every single year of a certain amount of stuff, and you pay me an ongoing fee for that. Now, with memberships, you're making people sticky. When you just say, okay, you're walking in, I'm going to send you a card and hope that you make an appointment with me. Well, if I have you as a membership, I have my office person call you up or send you an email or something and say, hey, it's time for your eye exam. Let's schedule you. I'm not now taking the pricing out of the friction that comes in with a client coming in because they're already paying me a membership.
Yeah.
That might include a pair of glasses a year. It might include a pair of prescription sunglasses a year. It might be, there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do in the optometry world where I would experiment with how can I create a recurring revenue stream. One of the challenges of selling your business is that a buyer wants cash flow. And an optometry store is a one-off as far as they're concerned. There is no recurring revenue that they can count on. If people walk in the store, great. People make appointments with you, great. But that's like a construction, as good as your last exam. But if I have a membership program, now I can say, I've got 1,000 people paying me $1,500 a year or $2,000 a year, or whatever the number is a year. And you make this into a high-end, you're seeing with dental practices now, where there are some concierge dental practices, which are like really fancy hotels.
Yeah.
Well, what's preventing an optometry practice from doing the same thing? The truth is, if you're charging twice what I can buy your glasses at Costco, you better do something to make me want to spend 2 times the amount of money with you versus going to Costco.
So that's an interesting concept because I guess the recurring revenue is recurring appointments, the annual check-in, year after year after year. But what you're talking about is is taking that recurring revenue out of that patient needing to go into the office and get checked out, but just having recurring revenue outside of that. And it makes it easier for you to then schedule that appointment because they're already a customer of yours. They're already sort of invested into your practice. So you're sort of stepping up like the value you're providing, one service after another.
Right.
And I've seen that actually in my own dentist too. I've seen that where they're offering cash paying customers annual memberships where you're getting 2 appointments per year at a discounted price because you're paying this annual membership fee monthly. So, I've seen that in my own dentist practice. I was kind of surprised, like, what in the world is this? This is very smart in my, because it actually, the math would have worked out for me. So you're seeing that in other service businesses. And I think that is something interesting to explore, and pairing that with something like a patient advisory council that will tell you, is this valuable to them or is it not? Would they spend their own money on it or would they not? So I think some really interesting ideas there. Definitely different than the status quo. You may not see these in Review of Optometric Business. So something different to think about there. As we sort of wrap up, and we've talked about removing the owner doctor from that day-to-day operations of the practice, making them operationally free or irrelevant, whichever way you want to use that. We've talked about building a sale-ready practice for those who want to build a larger business outside of themselves. We've talked about new ideas in terms of marketing and getting the patients involved in the direction of the practice. What are some final action steps, like having talked about all that? Like, what are 1, 2, or 3 things that a practice owner can take away from this and add to their practice, do next week?
The first thing I would do if I was a practice owner, I would get very clear on what I want to do with my practice.
Yeah.
What should it look like? Now, we have a decision-making process we call the stage 2 decision process. And what it really goes down, here's how it works. You say, what is it that you want? I want to have a 3-unit practice, or I want to have a solo practice. I won't be happy with that. And then I will ask this question at least 5 times. Well, if you do that, how does that make your life better? If you do this, what will be different about your life? What is the importance of doing this? You keep digging down and digging down and digging down till you get what I call the core why. I tend not to like to ask the question why as why because it tends to be a put-off question. But if I can ask in other ways, I can get a really good answer. I then go back up to the what I want to do, which is I want to be a solo, I want to be a multi-unit, how many units do I want to have, all that sort of stuff. And I say, okay, now I know what my why is. Is this the most elegant way of getting me there? Once I figure out what the what is, then I need to go and figure out the who. Dan Sullivan just came out with this great book, new book called Who, Not Why.
Yep.
Or Who, Not How, excuse me. And the truth is, nobody ever gets any place by themselves. So you need to know who is going to be on the team. Is it outsiders? Is it insiders? Is it a combination of what? And then finally, when you get all that done, then you can go and only then go and look at how am I going to do it? And the how becomes obvious at that point. But you really need to get clarity. The number one thing you want is clarity about what's important to you.
That clarity and intentionality are just so important in almost every part of our work, yours and my work with clients. And
it is, the first thing I like to do with my one-on-one clients is we figure out what are your core values, what are your clarifying statements, and how do you integrate them into your business?
Yeah.
That's where we start. Now, that does nothing about directly creating cash, but it does everything about creating a business you'll love.
Yeah. And what's the point of owning the business if you don't at least like what you're doing day to day?
I go for love. I go for love. Love your business.
Got it.
Love your business. Love the people in your business. Love your customers. Use the darn word love.
Yeah. I love it. So where can people, Josh, find you, follow along with what you're doing, learn more about what you're doing?
Probably the best place for what we've been talking about today is go to our coaching website, our mentoring website, www.sustainablebusiness.co. We have a blog there. I do a weekly video or almost weekly video. Our podcast lives there. And there's a bunch of ways for you to join a resource center where we have content. We have a free resource center with a few things in it. We have a paid resource center with over 60 pieces of information in it. You can find that at www.sustainablebusiness.co. And if you want to contact me directly, is J Patrick, the letter J Patrick, at stage2solution, that's number2.com. So that's the easiest way to find me.
Perfect. Well, I will put all of that in the show notes. I will say firsthand, I've been following Josh's content for a long time, and it's absolutely worth the follow at the very minimum. So take a look at everything Josh is doing. Josh, really appreciate you coming on and taking the time to talk today. There's so much to learn from, and hopefully some optometrists will at least follow along with what you're doing. For the listener, thank you again so much for coming on. For new listeners, really appreciate you joining, and we'll see you all on the next episode. Take care.
Want more resources to help master your money? Check out the Education Hub on Evon's website at optometrywealth.com. Evon Mendrin is a certified financial planner and owner of Optometry Wealth Advisors, a California registered investment advisor. All opinions of Evon and his guests are their own. This show is for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for specific investment, legal, tax, or other decisions. Clients of OWA may own securities mentioned on this show.